Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will read Class 9 chapter The Happy Prince by Oskar Wilde. It is chapter 5 of Class 9 book, Moments. Who was the Happy Prince and why was he called the Happy Prince? Let's find out in the chapter. The Happy Prince was a beautiful statue. He was covered with gold, he had sapphires for eyes and a ruby in his sword. Why did he want to part with all the gold that he had and his precious stone? To part means to be separated. So the Happy Prince was not somebody alive. It was actually a beautiful statue which was covered all over with gold and precious stone. Sapphires and ruby are precious stone. So he had sapphires for eyes and ruby in his sword. But he wanted to part away with all his gold and precious stones. Why? Let's find out in the chapter. High above the city on a tall column stood the statue of Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of gold. Gilded means covered thinly. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. Hilt is the handle. So the statue of Happy Prince was high above the city on a tall column at a high place on a pillar. It was covered all over with thin leaves of gold, and for eyes he had two bright sapphires and there was a large red ruby that glowed on his sword handle. One night there flew over the city a little swallow. Swallow is a little bird. The swallow's friend had already gone to Egypt 6 weeks before, but the swallow decided to stay behind and then he decided to go to Egypt too after 6 weeks. All day long the swallow flew and at night he came over the city. He arrived in the city where the statue of the Happy Prince was. And he said to himself, where shall I put up? That means where shall I stay for the night? And he thought that the town had made some preparation for his arrival. Then he saw the statue on the tall column and he cried, I will put up there. He decided that he will stay for the night there. It is fine position with plenty of fresh air. As the statue was high up in the city, he thought that it was a fine position. There is plenty of fresh air. So he alighted himself between the feet of the Happy Prince and he said softly to himself, I have a golden bedroom. He said so looking around. And he prepared to go to sleep. But just as he was putting his head under his wings, a large drop of water fell on him. But just as the swallow was preparing to sleep, a large drop of water fell on him. What a curious thing. He thought, this is such a strange thing. There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are clear. The sky is bright and yet it is raining. Then another drop fell. What is the use of statue if it cannot keep the rain off? The swallow said, what is the use of this tall statue if it cannot save me from the rain? I must look for a chimney pot. He decided to fly away from that spot and look for a chimney pot. But before he opened his wings to fly, a third drop fell on him and the swallow looked up. And what did he see? The eyes of the Happy Prince were filled with tears and the tears were running down his golden cheek. His beautiful face was shining in the moonlight, but it was crying. So the swallow felt pity for the prince and he said, who are you? The prince said, I am a happy prince. Then the swallow said, if you are happy prince, then why are you weeping? You have quite drenched me. Drenched means make completely wet. You have made me completely wet. Then the prince said, when I was alive, I had a human heart and I did not know what tears were. As I lived in a palace, I never saw sorrow, as sorrow was not entered to allowed in the palace. And my courtiers called me Happy Prince because I was a happy prince. I lived happy and I died happy. And then I died and now I am dead and they have set me so high up here that I can see all the ugliness and miseries of my city. The prince, when he was alive, he was happy as he did not have any sorrow in the palace. Sorrows were not allowed to enter. But when he died, they put up his statue high up in the city from where he can see the entire city and the ugliness, the sorrows, the miseries, the sadness of people. And though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep. He said, now my heart is made of lead, as the statue heart was made of lead. And he says that now I see the sorrow of people and I cannot help but weep. I just cry. What? Is he not solid gold? Said the swallow to himself. So a swallow said to himself, is this statue not made of gold entirely? As he wanted to be polite and not to make any personal remarks. Then the prince continued, far away, he continued in his low musical voice, far away in a little street there is a poor house. One of its window was open, and through the window the prince could see a woman who is seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn out, and she has coarse means rough and not smooth hands, all pricked. Pricked means small holes were made because of sharp needles. All pricked, for she is a seamstress. Seamstress is a woman who makes her living by stitching or sewing. She is embroidering flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of queens maids of honor. So she was making embroidery of flowers on a gown for the queen's maid of honor, one of the queen's friend or companion, for the upcoming court ball. Court ball is a party in the palace where there is gathering of people. In the bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has fever. He is asking his mother to give him some oranges, but the mother has nothing to offer to him except the river water, so he is crying. So the prince said, swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hill? So he said that, will you not give her the ruby from my sword hill? As my feet are fastened, my feet are tied to this pedestal, to this column, and I cannot move. So the first person the prince wanted to help was the seamstress. Now the swallow tried to make some excuse. I am awaited for in Egypt. My friend I have already gone there. They are flying up and down the Nile River, and they are talking to large lotus flowers, and soon they will go to sleep. But the prince requested him to stay with him for one night and be his messenger, as the boy is thirsty and the mother is sad. Then again the swallow tried to make an excuse. I don't think I like boys. I want to go to Egypt. But the happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow felt sorry. And he said, okay, it's very cold here, but he agreed to stay with him for a night and be his messenger. And the prince thanked him. Now the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak over the roof of the town. He finally helped the prince and took the ruby. He passed the cathedral tower. Cathedral means church tower, where there were little marble white angel sculptures. In the churches we often see statues of angels. He passed the palace and heard the sound of dancing. A beautiful girl came out on the balcony with her lover, and she said, I hope my dress will be ready in time for the state ball. I have ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, but the seamstress are too lazy. Unaware of the situation of the seamstress, the lady commented that, I hope my dress is ready. Seamstresses are so lazy. Now he passed over the river. He saw the lanterns hanging on the masts of the ship. Masts are the pole that rises vertically from a ship and that supports the sail. So he passed through the church, through the palace, through the mast of the ship, and finally he made it to the poor woman's house. He looked there. The boy was tossing. He had fever. He was feverishly tossing in the bed as he was feeling very warm. His mother had fallen asleep. She was very tired. And the bird hopped and laid the ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Thimble is a small plastic cap which is worn in the finger to protect it from pricking. Then the bird flew around the boy's bed gently. He flapped his wings and fanned the boy at his forehead. The boy felt a little cool because of the air that came because of flapping of the wings. And the boy thought, I must be getting better. And he sank into a delicious slumber. Slumber means deep sleep. Now the swallow, after helping the seamstress, went back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. And he said, it is curious. Curious here means strange. So the bird said, it is curious. I feel quite warm, although it is cold. Though it is cold outside, I am feeling warm. And the prince replied, this is because you have done a good action by helping somebody. And the little swallow began to think, and he fell asleep as thinking helped him in sleeping. Then the day broke and he flew down to the river. He had a bath and then decided that tonight he will go to Egypt. And then he was in high spirits in the prospect by thinking that he was feeling very happy. He visited the monuments of the city. He took a long time. He sat on the church steeple. Steeple is tower of the church. And when moon rose, he flew back to the prince to bid him goodbye. He said, have you any commissions for Egypt? Commissions means instructions or command, as I am starting for Egypt. Then the happy prince again said, "Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you stay with me one night longer?" So he requested, "Will you stay for one more night?" And the swallow said, "I am waited for in Egypt." Then the prince again said, the second person he wanted to help was a playwright. He said, "Far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret." Garret is a small dark room at the top of a house, and the young man is leaning over, his desk is covered with paper, and in the glass by his side there is a bunch of withered violet. Withered means almost on the verge of dying. Violets are flowers. So there are flowers, they are almost on the verge of dying. The man has brown hair, they are crisp brown hair, his lips are red like pomegranate, and he has a large dreamy eye. He is trying to finish a play for the director of theatre, but he is feeling too cold as there is no fire in his grate. Grate is a place where fire is made to keep the room warm, and because of hunger he is faint. He is feeling very weak. So the prince requested that, "Will you help me with by helping the playwright?" And the swallow said, "Okay, I will wait with you one night longer," who really had a good heart. The swallow had a good heart, so he decided to help. He asked if he should take another ruby to the young playwright. The swallow asked, "Should I take another ruby?" But the prince said, "Alas, I don't have any ruby. My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphire which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago." So he said, "I don't have ruby, but there are sapphires in my eyes which were brought from India thousands of years ago." And he ordered the swallow to pluck one of them and take it to the playwright, and the playwright will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play. But the swallow said that, "I can't do that," and he began to weep. Then the prince said, "Swallow, swallow, little swallow, I do as I command." So the prince commanded the swallow. So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew to the young man's garret. It was easy to go into it as he went through a hole in the roof, and he darted and he came in the room. The young man had his head buried in his hand, so he could not see or hear the flutter of the bird's wing. And when he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violet, as the swallow has kept the sapphire near the withered violets, the flowers. So the young man saw that, and he thought, "I am beginning to be appreciated." He thought that some of the person who admired him has sent it. "This is from great admirer. Now I can finish my play." And he looked quite happy. The playwright was looking quite happy. He thought, now he can finish his play. And then the next day, the swallow flew down to the harbor. Harbor is the place where ships are placed. They are halted. He sat on the mast of a large vessel and watched the sailor working. Again, he sat there. He sat on the top point of a ship and he saw the sailors working. And then he decided, "I am going to Egypt." He cried there. He shouted there, but nobody listened to him. They were all doing his work. And then he flew back to the happy prince again to say goodbye to him. So he said, "I have come to bid goodbye." Then the prince again said, "Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not stay with me one night longer?" He said, the prince requested, "Please stay with me one more night." "It is winter," said the swallow, "and the snow will be here soon. In Egypt, the sun is warm and green palm trees. The crocodile lie in the mud and look lazy about them." So he told the prince about Egypt, and he thought that the prince will allow him to go to Egypt. But again, the prince wanted to convince him, as he wanted to help another person. This time it was a match girl. So the prince said that, "Below, I see a match girl. There's a little match girl who is standing. All her matches had fallen in the gutter and they have all spoiled, and her father will beat her up if she does not bring home money. She is crying. She has no shoes, stocking, and her little head is also bare. There is no cloth on her head also." So he said, "Pluck my another eye and give it to her so that she can give it to her father." The swallow said that, "I will stay here one night longer, but I cannot pluck your eyes as you will be blinded." And the prince said, "Do as I command." The prince again commanded the swallow. So the swallow plucked another eye of the prince and went down, swooped past the girl. He flew through the girl, near the girl, and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hands. He put the sapphire in the palm of the match girl's hand. And the girl cried, "What a lovely bit of glass." She didn't know it was a precious stone. She said, "What a lovely bit of glass," and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince and he said, "You are blinded now, so I will stay with you always." So the swallow decided to stay with the prince always. "No, little swallow," the prince said, "you must go away to Egypt." So the prince now insisted, "Now you must go to Egypt." Now the swallow said, "No, I will stay with you always." And he slept at the feet of the prince. The next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him the story about what he had seen in the strange land. He told him the stories of the places that he had been to. Then the prince said, "Dear little swallow, you tell me marvelous things, you tell me wonderful things. But more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. But there are people suffering. People of my city are suffering, and there is no mystery so great as misery." So misery, poor, being helpless is the greatest misery. So he said, "Fly over the city and tell me, what do you see?" So the prince told the swallow to fly over his city and tell him what he sees. So the swallow did as the prince said. He flew over the city, saw the rich making merry, saw the rich living in beautiful houses while the beggars were sitting at the gate. Then he flew into the dark lane and he saw poor people there. He saw under the archway of the bridge, under the bridge, there were two little boys sitting. They were hugging each other, as that is how they could keep themselves warm. But the watchman came and shouted on them and told them to run away, and the boys ran away in the rain. Then he flew back to the prince and told what he had seen. And the prince said, "I am covered with fine gold. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to poor. And this way they can have a happy living, as they can sell the gold." So leaf after leaf, the fine gold was taken by the swallow. It was picked by the swallow and it was given to the poor. Now the happy prince looked quite dull and grey because all the gold and precious stone was taken. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew happier as they found the gold. They laughed and played and they said, "Now we will have bread." Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost, which is bitter cold. And the street looked as if they were made of silver, as there was snowfall everywhere. Everybody went about in furs. Everybody was wearing fur, and the little boys, they started wearing scarlet caps and they skated on the ice. Now the poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved the prince so well. So he picked up the crumbs outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. So the swallow, in order to survive, he picked small pieces that was left at the baker's door when the baker was not looking, and to keep himself warm, he would flap his wings. But at last he knew that he is going to die, so he just gathered enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder one more time, and he said, "Goodbye, dear prince. Will you let me kiss your hand?" So the swallow said, "Can I kiss your hand?" And the prince said, "I am glad that you are finally going to Egypt. You have stayed too long here, but you must not kiss me on my hand. You must kiss me on my lips, because I love you." Then the swallow said that "I am not going to Egypt. I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not?" So prince was not aware of the condition of swallow. So the swallow said that "I am not going to Egypt. I am going to die." And he kissed the happy prince on his lips and fell down dead at his feet. As soon as this happened, at that moment there was a strange crack sound inside the statue. A sound of crack came as something was broken inside the statue also. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right in two. It certainly had a dreadful heart frost. So the fact was that since the swallow died, the leaden heart of the prince also broke into two, and he also died at very instance. The next morning, the mayor of the city, he was walking around the city accompanied by his two counselors. As they passed the column, they looked at the statue and they said, "Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks." He said that this prince looks so shabby, and the town councillor also repeated him, as they always used to do the same thing which the mayor did. The ruby had fallen out of the sword, the eyes had gone, the gold was no longer there. He was looking just a little better than beggar. And the councillors repeated. And here is actually a dead bird at the feet, continued the mayor. The mayor saw the dead bird also, and he said, there is a dead bird also at the feet. We must really issue a proclamation. Proclamation is a public or official announcement that the birds are not to be allowed to be died here. And the town clerk made the note of this suggestion. So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince as he was no longer beautiful, no longer useful. This was explained by the art professor at the university. That is why the prince statue was taken down, as it was not looking any beautiful and it was not useful. And then they melted the statue in a furnace. They took it to a furnace, they melted the statue, whatever was left there. What a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. At the foundry where the statue was being melted, he said, what a strange thing. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. The strange thing was that everything had melted, but the broken lead heart was not melted. So we must throw away. So they decided to throw it away, and they threw it at the same heap, at the same garbage heap where the dead swallow was lying. So this was the love of the swallow and the prince, that they finally were together. At some other place in the heaven, bring me the two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels, and the angels brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. So the God ordered his angels, bring me the two most precious things from the city, and what the angels brought was the leaden heart and a dead bird. You have rightly chosen, said God, for in my garden of paradise the little bird shall sing forevermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me. So the God said that you have made a right choice, because in my paradise, in my heaven, the little bird will sing forever, and the gold of happy prince will be praised in my paradise. So why the dead bird and the broken heart of the prince were brought? Because they did a good thing. They did very good thing by helping poor in the city. They even sacrificed their life for that. Hence, they were the most precious things in the city. That is why the angel brought those two things when the God asked for the precious thing. So this was about the chapter, The Happy Prince, children. I hope you have understood. Bye-bye for now. Take care.